The summer series continues here on a legal curve, and we get going with 2021 first rounder Chaz Lucius, who's back home in Minnesota. Hey, Chaz, how's it going? How's your
Good.
summer treating you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing well. As I told, we started this off yesterday, and it's a little warm here in Winnipeg. We're not complaining though, because we know what's around the corner. So we're gonna enjoy the heat as you would in Minnesota, and then we know what's coming soon enough.
Absolutely.
Well, we saw you, speaking of being here in Winnipeg, we saw you in July for development camp. You were wearing a yellow non-contact uniform. We'll get into your shoulder surgery that you underwent back in February. But I believe at the time when we spoke to you, you said something like you were 2 or 3 weeks away from contact. So, firstly, how's your shoulder feeling, and have you started contact yet?
Yeah. I think first off, the shoulder's feeling really good. It's going to be ready to go for start of season and rookie camp, which is going to be huge for me, and I think in a very important step in my development. And then as far as contact goes, skating wise, I've started to do contact the last basically 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and it's been really good. Doesn't hurt at all, and it's honestly been feeling awesome.
Would you normally, I know that, of course, like I said, you're a Minnesota guy, so the beauty league, do you participate in that? How do you get into that? Do you have to ask someone? Do you ask Nate Schmidt? We know he's accessible. So how would you be part of that? And would you have been ready to go for that if everything was going along with your training?
Yeah, I would have been part of that this summer. I got asked to do it, but obviously with the shoulder stuff, I just
Hmm.
wasn't enough games and talking to my agents and stuff. It just probably wasn't the smartest thing to do right now with my shoulder and whatnot. But I mean, yeah, I think next summer for sure. I definitely like to play in it. It's an awesome league, and yeah, it seems like a lot of fun.
Well, and I talked to CJ Cease, who obviously is a Minnesotan, come back to Manitoba after being drafted by the Jets. And one of the things I talked about was just being able to make an impression with kids. And we'll talk about that in terms of the development camp that you guys were just part of. But, that idea of connecting with your fellow Minnesotans. At one point, you were that young kid looking up to these guys who are playing. And now you're going to have that opportunity to make that kind of impact. So it's got to be pretty cool for you to have that chance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so, especially, being from Minnesota and obviously playing for the Gophers too. I think a lot of people in Minnesota look up to kind of the path that I've taken and whatnot. So it's always good to give back and do things like that for sure whenever I have the opportunity to.
Well, let's get back into what. Speaking of the Gophers, you switched from the Gophers. You signed your first pro contract in 2022. You did your first pro training camp here in Winnipeg. So, what was it like to go from playing against college guys to being with your fellow Jets prospects, but also playing against NHLers who have 10, 15 years of experience in the NHL?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot different for sure. I think the biggest thing is that experience wise, and then obviously the veterans on the team and stuff. They just know how to be a pro a lot better. And I mean, as you age and get older and start to develop and do hopefully one day an NHL player, and I think that's a big thing is to become that NHL player, that player that you want to be. But I think it's steps. It's a lot of hard work, and I mean, just looking up to those guys on the Jets right now and things like that, it's obviously awesome. And that camp was a big lesson for me and a big step forward. I think going into this next year's camp.
Well, and I remember, and to jog my memory, I went back and watched some of the interviews. And I think one of the things at the time you said was just how supportive guys were with the Jets and the Moose for you, not just you, but all the young players, you know, in the organization. And looking back on that, I think you're assigned in early October to the Moose. But looking back, you're a young guy, you're getting your start in pro hockey. How important was it to get your new life started in this country, but have that sort of base of, now that you can think about it, how important was it to you helping you get that start here in Winnipeg from that support?
Yeah, I do remember saying that, and I still do. I mean, obviously, everyone's great in that organization, and I truly believe that. Whether it's guys in the Manitoba Moose, those veterans, or guys on the Jets, it was really an easy transition there as far as camp win and the camaraderie between the guys. Everyone was pretty involved in every day to day tasks and things. So, I mean, I think that was a really cool part and beneficial part. And I think as far as just playing for the Manitoba Moose with that, all those veteran guys, it was good to see their pro skills and the kind of their leadership with it too, and how they treat everyone the same, which I felt like was really important for me just to kind of get my start in pro hockey.
Well, speaking of living a new life in a new city, how did you find the adjustment to being in Winnipeg and in Canada? You spent the first 2 decades, almost 2 decades of your life in the US. So, what, if any, differences did you notice coming up here?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is how passionate the fans are with their hockey in Winnipeg. I think it's definitely a big thing there, and I mean hockey's obviously huge in Canada, but I think for myself, just kind of living on my own, like no family really at all, and I think that was the first time in my life that I really had that, like cooking, whether it's cooking dinners or on your own or pregame meals or doing things like that. I think was a big adjustment for sure. But I mean, as far as the city goes, it was awesome, and I look forward to coming back next year.
How intimidating is that? And I was just talking to Danny Zhilkin the other day, and one of the things we talked about was it's different for a guy in the U.S. We think about it traditionally. It's different for a guy in the U.S. or Canada, as he is, to be dropped in a city like Winnipeg at 19 years of age and say, "Okay, here you go." But even it's, and I'm going to get back to you guys in a sec. But for a guy like Nikita Chibrikov, who joined the Moose later in the year, you were obviously not there at that point, but he's coming from Russia. He's been there. It's a total culture shock. But even for someone like yourself, it's a bit of an adjustment, like you said. So is that something that maybe is a little bit overlooked or taken for granted? It's just people say, "Oh, it's easy. You're, playing pro hockey," but it's still a big adjustment from what you've been used to pretty much your entire life.
Yeah, I'd say people overlook that a ton. I'd say, like, from just a lifestyle standpoint, take the hockey out of it. When you're living on your own at 19 years old, it's not an easy thing for anybody, and especially, trying to play hockey with it in a new city, kind of new culture, new atmosphere, and new team. So that's definitely a really challenging part of it. And I think the biggest thing for me is like when I start to feel comfortable, the hockey part starts to come too. And I think this year it'll be a lot different with that, just knowing the city, knowing where to go, and having that comfortability with that stuff.
Well, you got comfortable in Manitoba pretty quickly because after a few weeks of training camp with the Moose, you played in your first Moose game, your first pro hockey game. You scored your first goal, which I believe was a deflection of a Kevin Stenlin shot pass, I should say. But how much do you remember about that goal? And are you the kind of person who keeps memorabilia? Do you keep something like that? Do you keep your first puck? Do you keep your first jersey? What do you do with that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I still have the puck in my room back home in Minnesota, so that's kind of a fun little thing. But I mean, as far as the goal goes, I was just on the power play in the middle. I think Asimon actually passed it to Stenlin, and then Stenlin kind of did a shot pass to me, and
Mhm.
luckily right in, which was awesome.
Yeah. And then do you keep the jersey, anything like that, or are you just kind of more about the pucks?
I don't have the jersey. I'll tell you that. I don't have it.
I'll have to talk to the Moose folks to see if they can get it for you.
Yeah.
But speaking of playing center, and you played 12 games in total for the Manitoba Moose during your time there, but the transition from center. I mean, look, people can say that it's not the NHL, but the AHL is a really good hockey league, and there are pros who have been in pro hockey a long time. They know what they're doing. Playing center is an easy transition from college or junior into the pros, but the team kept you up the middle the entire time that you were there. I'm pretty sure. Like I said, I went back and I looked, and I thought for all 12 games you did play center. So what was it like for you, and how did you find that adjustment from your year of college with the Gophers to that 12 game stint with the Moose?
Yeah, the adjustment I'd say was pretty big because at the University of Minnesota I played right wing the whole year, so I didn't
Right.
play any games at center. So I was kind of in a way a little maybe surprised that they were putting me at center just to start the camp, but it's the position that I feel like I'm most comfortable with. And obviously, is when you play right wing the whole year and then get switched back to center, it's obviously a little different. But I felt like as far as faceoffs and things like that go in the center position, the defensive game, 200 feet, it got a lot better as the games went on.
And did you draw on the experience of guys who were playing center for the Moose, or was it like head coach Mark Morrison or whomever to say, like, did you find that they were willing, like, this is a teaching, Mark Morrison, the one thing about him is he seems to thrive on the idea of developing prospects and getting you guys to that next level. So did you feel like, hey, you know what? I don't have to, even though you want to look like you know what you're doing, if you have questions, you got to be able to ask them. And these guys seem like, from someone who's on the outside of the organization, that they're willing to say, Jazz, we'll give you whatever you need to get you to that next level.
Yeah, absolutely. The coaching staff there is awesome. They worked with me every single day on face-offs, defensive zone coverage, watching video, things like that, and were super supportive throughout my games. They obviously knew that I wasn't going to be perfect, but they wanted to keep seeing me improve every single game.
Well, one of the things I noticed about you, and like I said, I watched all of the games, but one of the things I definitely noticed was your creativity. And some rookies may not be as inclined to be creative and try to take some risks. But I noticed, like I said, especially in and tight around the net, you were willing to do that. You relished those opportunities, it seemed to me, to be a distributor to your teammates and try and like I said, do some things that were a little outside the box, I thought. Does that speak to something that the coaching staff was willing to kind of give you that opportunity to say, Chaz, you're a creative guy. You have this mindset that, can see things, use it. Don't just try and be like X's and O's type of guy.
Yeah, absolutely, to a certain extent, especially in the offensive zone, to be as creative as possible and kind of use that ability that I have to create time and space for not only myself but my line mates is a big thing. And I just think as far as confidence goes with that, I think making those moves or thinking outside the box with that, I think that's always how I've played for the most part. And I think they didn't really want to take that away from me. They just want to hone that in and make sure that I can play that 200-foot game as well and do that stuff.
Again, it's going to sound obvious, but I'm asking anyways. It's got to be refreshing, right? To say they're not trying to break you. They're not trying to break your spirit and say they want you to become a pro and they want it to be a certain way, but they're also willing to work within the framework of what you've got as a skill set that got you to them in the first place.
Yes, absolutely. That's very fair to say.
Yeah. So, it's a good way to produce prospects who are eventually going to be in the NHL. And one of those things that I was going to ask you, and you touched on a little bit, but what were the things that you noticed that you really learned from the coaching staff during your time, the 3 months that you were with the Moose?
Yeah, I think not only from the coaching staff, just, on time to meetings, all that stuff, obviously non-negotiables, but just, even showing up earlier, as the rookie guy, being there earlier, putting in more work and doing those little things that make a big difference is huge, I think. And then as far as, playing with other guys that have been in the league a long time or have played pro hockey, NHL games or whatnot, I think it's a big thing just to learn from them and kind of how they conduct themselves on a day-to-day basis, take care of their bodies is the biggest thing that I feel like I learned from that. And then just the work ethic with that.
And what did you think about just, that some of the off ice stuff, but just like, traveling as a pro, going to different cities. And like I said, I know you had some injury troubles with the Moose a little bit, not significant. You only missed 3 games, but the idea of just being able to travel with the team in a different fashion again than you would have been used to with college.
Yeah, I'd say it's different for sure. I mean, like people don't even think about just getting to the airport and doing things like that, like in a new city and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. It's all foreign, which is a big thing. And I think, as I got more comfortable with that, going to the rink, even parking for home games, like where to go, how to get in, like do
Mm-hmm.
people name, those kind of things. And, I think sometimes people just think, you just go in, it's just that easy transition, but it's not always the case. But I mean, as far as the travel and stuff goes, I think we had one road trip that was a week and a half long, which was definitely the longest that I've had for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then a 3-3, I think our first weekend or second weekend of the season, that was a lot of hockey as well. So I think just that different schedule was definitely an adjustment, but overall, I think it went well.
Well, one of the keys, of course, is just learn the security guards' names. If you know Guy, and if you know Perry, and if you know Wendy, and all that crew, then they're always going to be good to you, and they'll always assist you in whatever you need.
Yeah.
Um, but so your time in the AHL came to a conclusion. Like I said, you were dealing with a little bit of a bump and bruise. Then you go to you get assigned to the USA junior team, where I think you started off as like a limited participant, but then eventually, of course, you got started and you got going and you played obviously a significant role, which we'll talk about in a second. But firstly, like, what does it mean to you to put on that Team USA sweater and represent your country on a global stage like the World Juniors?
Yeah, it's huge. I think growing up as a kid, that's everything you kind of dream about, is that as far as that and World Juniors for playing for your country. Obviously, Olympics is a big thing too, but World Juniors is a big thing that I always thought about if I ever had the opportunity to, that would be a great experience for me. And I think this one for me meant a little more just because I was on that team that COVID
Mm-hmm.
had. Only played one game and didn't get to see that out, which was unfortunate. And we were dealing with the pandemic at the time, so there's not much anyone could do. Yeah, it was an awesome experience there, and I'm really happy. At least we won the bronze there and got a medal for our country.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about next is that bronze medal game, because I'm not sure there's been a wilder World Junior game that I can remember than that one. You don't often see 8-7 games. You, of course, had 3 goals, including the game winner. So what did it mean to you to be the hero? Because like I said, to me, that was like a bonkers hockey game. I remember watching the score and you're like, what is going on? Like it just doesn't seem real. And then, so have you played a more memorable hockey game, and how much, again, did it mean to play the hero for the team and your country?
I think as far as everything goes and the memories I have from that game, that's probably the most memorable I have so far. Just given like how I played and the role that I played in that game to help the team secure that medal, I think was big, and just how crazy the game was. Whatever it was, 8-7, it was wild. We scored it. They scored in the last like 20 seconds or whatever, and then obviously we won in overtime, which was awesome. But I think, as far as that game goes, it was really fun to play in, and I was really happy with the outcome for our team in that.
Well, I mean, again, like I said, that's just watching it from as a dispassionate person. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, this game is insane. So it definitely, I couldn't only imagine what it was just to play in it, and then of course to be able to contribute the game winning goal. So that's got to be, like you said, that's the first of hopefully many significant memories in your hockey career. But that's a big one for sure. And so you go back to Minnesota, because I think you said you were going to have a few days before, and then, of course, the team decides to reassign you to the Portland Winterhawks of the WHL, and I believe who held your junior rights. So, what was the discussion like between Winnipeg, your representation, and yourself in terms of uh, that next step in your journey to becoming a pro? Is the idea of going back and playing for Portland in the WHL?
Yeah, I think first off, when I heard the news, I wasn't really happy about it. I think I'd be lying if I said I was.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously going into that city, having an apartment and doing all those things, like I felt like I was already set up there, and especially after World Juniors, kind of getting my groove with that, and I had a lot
Yep.
more play and give. So obviously that sucked just as the competitor in me, but then talking with Shovel Day off and those guys, the upper management, they said this would be a really good opportunity to me to kind of keep developing my offensive part of the game and kind of be a leader on the team and one of the older guys, because I've never had that before. So obviously went to Portland after, I spent like a week at home just getting all
Yeah.
my stuff together. I had to go to Winnipeg, get all that stuff. Moved out to Portland, and that was honestly a great experience. I had a blast out there up until I got hurt. Like it was awesome time. All the guys were great. City was great. It was awesome.
And again, that kind of reiterates the point of people just take for granted. Like, okay, Chaz is going from Winnipeg to World Juniors and now to Portland, and it's like this, and it's like, no, he's got to go, he's got to get his stuff, and he's got to
Yeah.
move all the stuff back. So again, there's a lot more involved to it, and people just, and obviously you get it, like team will help you out, but there's still a lot involved in terms of that process.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Nobody's gonna pack up your stuff for you. That's Yeah, obviously when I heard the news, I got on a flight to Winnipeg, and my roommate was actually Brad Lambert, ironically. So we were
Okay,
just
I was gonna say that. There you go.
we were sitting there packing our stuff in the morning, and I had my car up there too and everything. So then I drove back to Minnesota the next day, and then had to drive up to Portland with my car.
Oh, okay. Well, at least then at least you'd have a vehicle. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's things that we take for granted, and you just think, okay, he's gonna play in Portland. Like 2 nights later, it's like, no, there's a lot more steps involved in terms of getting you to that. But what was it like once you were in Portland? I know you said it was a great experience, but transitioning from playing against pros now to being back again in junior. And again, I'm not maligning junior hockey because it's excellent hockey, but it's obviously not pros.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say for one, I just felt like there was a lot more time and space on the ice, especially from going, AHL, World Juniors, all that. It was pretty high
Yeah.
level hockey.
Right.
And going to WHL, it was still high level hockey, but obviously there's some younger guys in the league, and I feel like being an older guy in that league, it's a pretty big advantage with that, just maturity wise and having a couple years on them of experience. Just like if it were me in my first year AHL and a guy's played 4 years AHL or NHL or whatever, it's just that experience thing I think is a big thing, and just that developing. But as far as Portland goes, all the coaching staff, all that were awesome, and they helped me get acclimated right away. Honestly, like I said, it was just a great experience there, and I really felt like I played great hockey there.
Well, I don't think there's any question about that because the numbers bear it out. But before we get into how you played on the ice, question in terms of not many guys played college and junior. You're one of the few. So, what did you notice in terms of similarities, differences between those two levels of hockey?
Yeah, I think as far as teams go, I think some of the better teams in the league are up there with the top college teams, and some of the not so good ones in the league, are the lower end of it, just like any league. But I think like as far as teams like say like Seattle Thunderbirds last year, teams like that, like they'd be right up there with the top college teams, and really fun team to play against and things like that. But I think also too in college you just get a little more of the older guys, and obviously Cages is a little different, so I feel like there's a little
Hmm.
more stick checking and things like that, and things like that. But otherwise, I feel like it's pretty similar for the most part. Just some younger guys in the WHL.
Well, your teammate Tyrell Bauer is going to be happy you mentioned the Seattle Thunderbirds, and he'll be pumped up about that. The other thing I wanted to ask you, you mentioned Brad Lambert. Was that a little bit easier because you guys were both, first round picks, highly regarded prospect, but the fact that you guys are both being assigned to the junior ranks, he of course went to Seattle, and you going to Portland. Did that make that transition from Winnipeg to your respect? I'm not asking you to speak for Brad, but just in terms of for your mindset, was that a little bit easier?
Yeah, I'd say, not putting words in Brad's mouth, but I'd say it was a little easier to take it for both of us, the news of doing that, because obviously, like I said, we had all our stuff in Winnipeg and that stuff, and we didn't really plan on that. Obviously, it's in the back of your mind, but you don't know until it actually happens. So I feel like as far as that goes, like going through it together with that, which we kind of did a lot of things, together last year as far as hockey went, World Juniors, all that stuff, kind of the same. That I think it was a lot easier, and we talked almost every day there, and it was awesome.
I guess here's a complete aside, a little segue, but how do you get assigned to be a roommate with Brad Lambert? Do you guys, talk in development camp? You're sitting in the hotel. You're like, okay, we could live together. Or how do you reach that conclusion that you guys can be roomies?
That's a good question. I think as far as camp goes, we kind of really gelled together. He's an awesome guy, and just a good person. And I think, we were kind of just sick living in the hotel for a little bit.
Yeah.
We were already living in the hotel kind of together because we were the last two young guys there. Then we just decided to rent an apartment together, which was awesome, and it was a blast. And it was really good just to have someone there, another younger guy to kind of go through that experience with.
Well, it's always easier to ensure that you're not going to be late for a meeting if you know there's two guys watching
Yeah,
that clock, not just one.
true. Absolutely.
Okay, so going back to Portland, so you said you had a good impact, and you did. Obviously, I think 5 goals, 10 assists in 6 games. So, what does that do for your confidence? Because you spoke about it, and it must have, really done something because you were clearly having an impact on the ice.
Yeah, I think it ignited a big passion of mine again in hockey. I think, when I got sent to Portland, obviously, it's you can look at it two ways, but either way, like it's not a fun thing to have happen to anybody. In some ways it feels like a little bit of a demotion, but I feel like I understood where Winnipeg was coming from with that to get the best out of me, and I totally understand that. But with that being said, like I said, it doesn't feel good.
Hmm.
But being there and doing that stuff in Portland, it was an awesome time, and I have good memories from there.
Well, okay, so you suffered the season-ending shoulder surgery at the end of January. Given you have a history of dealing with injuries, especially longer ones, how mentally taxing was that on you, knowing that you're in for a long rehab?
Yeah, I think when I first got the news, it was pretty tough for sure. This was my third season in a row having an injury with that, and just the things that come with that, I think are unfortunate because it's not just that; it's the what people say or those things and different things like that can also kind of get to you. And I try to that and just kind of play my game and do the rehab and things like that. But yeah, I mean, obviously it was unfortunate, and the rehab process has been pretty grueling, but there's nothing I can do about it. And at the end of the day, hockey's hockey, and these things happen.
Well, I was going to say, and we're not trying to put a positive on getting injured, but you are somewhat fortified in terms of dealing with it because I remember when we interviewed you when you got drafted by Winnipeg on draft night, and you told us, I think you said you were in a wheelchair for 6 weeks dealing with that knee injury when you got hit with the puck, and then you had to go through like hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So, did that almost prepare you? I mean, again, nobody wants to be dealing with an injury, but you kind of already have that mental. It's like any sort of training. You kind of know how to deal with mentally, at least, and physically to a certain degree, what you're going to have to deal with, so you can get healed and get ready to go again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say as far as rehabs go, the shoulder's been the easiest one for sure. Just because I've been able to walk and do those things, which is awesome. Which with my knee and ankles, I wasn't really able to do that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'd say my toughest one was definitely my knee, and that was obviously my first one, and that was almost a year of rehab, and that was a pretty grueling one, and one that I'm glad I'm done with.
So what did it look like for you? You're in Portland. You get the news. You have this surgery. Probably, I'm assuming, in sometime in February. So between February and when we saw you in development camp, what did those 5 months look like for you?
Yeah. So I got the surgery when I found out I needed it about, 5 days after in Winnipeg with
Mm,
Dr. at Pan Am Clinic. So went up there, got the surgery, came back home, and then basically from there, I was in a lot of pain the first week, that's for sure. Uh, and then I started the rehab process. I was in a sling for 6 weeks, so couldn't move my shoulder at all. And then from there, I started rehab, started working out just lower body, still with the sling on, and then I've kind of continued that stretch of it still now. And then I started skating, I believe, in I want to say maybe end of May, if
yeah.
that makes sense. Not harder, couldn't really shoot the puck, just skating, and then I'd say like before development camp, probably 2 weeks before that is when I started shooting pucks, and kind of the training with that.
Well, speaking of development camp, that's a nice segue for me because it's the first time that they've held it in Winnipeg in 4 years. Obviously, a couple of years due to COVID, and then last year they decided because of guys who were dealing with injury or guys who were with the Moose and had already been evaluated, they didn't need to hold one. So they held it this year. But how nice was it for you to get a chance to meet your fellow prospects, getting to know them on and off the ice?
Yeah, it was huge for sure. I think we have a great young group there. And I think there's a lot of leaders in that locker room for sure, and a lot of big personalities, which is awesome and great to see. And I think this time around, just the comfortability, like I said, of just being there, knowing all the staff and that stuff, like it does really make a difference. And I was really happy with how the camp went, and it was a lot of fun.
And again, do you see that as, I mean, and I know you know some of the guys, obviously Rucker McGordy, who the Jets drafted the year after you. He's he was on the US junior team with you that won bronze, but it is an opportunity to create more bonds, not just with, guys that you already know from USA hockey, but all these guys, like you said, a Brad Lambert or whomever that, or Brad, Colby Barlow, who's a new guy in the organization, and so many others that you're going to, again, hopefully be with for years to come as you guys try to become full-time NHLers.
Yeah, it's huge. I think just getting to know everyone and that stuff, kind of that camaraderie part of it, on ice is great, but off ice too, I think is really important just to get to know everyone and things like that. And as far as guys go there, I mean, everyone was awesome. It was a great camp, and I'm glad Winnipeg put it on this year.
How did you do in the escape room?
I was all right. I was okay. I wasn't great. Our squad was a little rough, but I think we battled through it and finished it. We got last place, but at least we finished it with like 2 minutes left.
Okay, there you go. At least you got it done. You didn't win, but you got it done.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and obviously, like you said, you lived in Winnipeg. You were here for training camp, but there is a different mindset, different mentality when you're here for development camp because obviously you're being evaluated. You're being evaluated when you drink water, for God's sake. So, like you guys are always being evaluated. But do you feel like it was a different sort of environment to be in because you're not competing for a job per se, what you're doing on the ice or the training off the ice. This is just more for them to show you around the city. And again, you're not a great example because you were in the city for 3 months already. But the idea that you guys are getting to see the city in a different way. It's a little more casual. You're going to a Gold Eyes game. You're doing. I know you guys went out for dinner. Did you see that it was did you get a different impression of Winnipeg in this regard versus when you're kind of in the mix of a hockey season?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, being in the summer in Winnipeg, it was nice to have it be warm for sure. That was a bonus. But yeah, I mean, I'd say it's definitely more of a relaxed vibe for sure. Just kind of doing dinners every night with the guys, just a little more casual, but still, pretty intense and put your work in and kind of do your job there to develop and be the best player that you can be.
I got to ask you about your brother Cruz, drafted by Carolina in the fourth round. How nice is it he just finished, I think, his first college season at the University of Wisconsin. So how nice is it for you guys to be going through this somewhat together? Obviously, you're going pros, he's college, but to have that experience, that shared experience between the two of you.
Yeah, it's awesome for sure. I mean, I don't think I'd even be in this situation or thing playing pro hockey without him. I mean, we push each other to the best of our ability growing up, and I was on his team all the way up until I left for the NTDP, which was awesome, and our bond is super close. And I'm really glad we get to go through this together. And I mean, he's a great brother.
That's good to hear. And so, I guess, what are some of the areas the organization wanted you to work on this summer?
Yeah, the biggest thing is just conditioning, overall strength, especially with going through my rehab and surgery is a big thing, and then just speed wise, I can get faster, stronger, all those video and 200-foot game and things like that. And face offs is a big thing.
Nice. Okay. Well, presuming you're with the Moose, because that's the expectation, there's a lot of excitement with these guys. One thing I've noticed, and I talked about it with the D prospects, and there are a lot of them. I'm not going to go through all the names, but one of the things that we've talked about is like Heinola and Bauer, two guys, defensemen, have different skill sets. Both can kind of learn from the other player. With you guys, I mentioned Jilkin already, Brad Lambert, Torgerson, Nikkinen, Chibrikov. Is there an excitement from your perspective that you can take things that these guys possess and add them to your game potentially?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all those guys that you just mentioned are obviously great young prospects, just like myself. And I think that's a big thing is learning from other guys and not just having one way of doing things, because every guy has their kind of own unique style and game, and kind of picking the good and the bad from everyone's game just to use the best of your ability, I think is a big thing and really important thing, especially when you have that skill on the ice.
All right, Chaz. Well, what does the last few weeks of summer look like before you return here to Winnipeg?
Yeah, a lot of training. I'll be skating, working out 5 days a week, and then on the weekends, usually golfing, hanging out with friends, wake surfing, going on the lake, fishing, and doing all of those things before I go. Just spend time with my family.
Okay, perfect. Well, we appreciate you joining us here on the Illegal Curve Summer Series. Have a great rest of your summer, and we'll talk to you when you're back in Winnipeg in September.
Yeah.